Hello students, today's video lecture is on the hip bone, otherwise known as the coxal bone. So we have two hips, we have a right and a left obviously, and the entire bone itself is called the coxal bone. So here's a lateral view of the right bone, and I'll tell you how to figure out that that's a lateral view. And here's a medial view. And if we take a look at our atlas, we'll be able to see how they come together to form the pelvis. So you can see in the atlas, here's one side. That would be the right coxal bone. And don't pay any attention to this because I'm multi-selected here. And then obviously the left one would be over here on this side. Notice, in order to form the pelvis, we're going to need to have these upper parts form a joint with the sacrum, so we'll talk about that. And another thing I want to caution you with as we look at the notes, specifically towards the bottom, these diagrams make it look very flat. However, we are incredibly aware that it is not flat. There's this entire sort of pelvic outlet here that allows you to see that there's 3 dimensions to this pelvis. So you really need to try to keep that in mind, that the sacrum and the coccyx are set way back. This piece here and this piece here are separated by the entire pelvic cavity distance. But when you look at it from the front, it sure looks like they're in the same plane. So you really have to keep that in your mind. Okay. So the coxal bone is made of 3 regions. It has an upper portion called the ilium, and on your diagram that's going to be letter A. It has a more posterior region called the ischium, and on your diagrams that is B. And then it has the pubis portion, which is letter C. So let's take a look in the atlas and then we'll come back to this. The ilium is this upper part that's flat, and you can see it has a slight curvature to it. Looks like it could have a nice fossa here, which it does, but it's just this section here, and it will make a joint with the sacrum. The pubis is the more anterior portion, just deep to the pubic region, and then the ischium is the part of the coxal bone that we sit on. So imagine, this arm is kind of in the way, but imagine when we sit, the femur is no longer down like this, it's forward like this. So that this is the lowest piece of the hip bone that we will sit on. So I kind of refer to the ischium as your butt bone. All right, so I'm going to make a little note about each one of these. Okay, so I said flat upper portion for ilium, ischium is the butt bone. Remember the little expression. I'll write out an expression. It's really quite goofy, but might help you remember. Ishy, squishy, in the tushy. So ishy is the ischium, and ishy rhymes with squishy, and then you can add on the word tushy to remember that it's on the butt side. Okay, ishy, squishy, in the tushy. And then pubis is the front part. Okay, so let's take a look at our pictures here. We're going to do these first 2. Here's a lateral view, here's a medial view. How would we ever know that this is a lateral view? Well, if we take a look at our app here, let me go ahead and delete our femur. What's present on that lateral aspect that's not present on the medial aspect of the bone? Okay, this bone specifically, and I'm going to highlight all parts of it. What's present on this view, lateral, that's not present on this view, medial? Ignore all this and just focus on this blue. And if you're thinking, well, duh, the socket's right here, you are correct. So we will recognize a lateral view of the coxal bone because we're seeing this massive socket where the femur fits. Okay, and later on I'm going to tell you what that socket's called, but we'll save that for later. So we know we're looking from the lateral aspect if we are looking into the socket, which is this area right here, and we can see on the other side that the femur, the head of the femur, will fit right into there to form a ball and socket joint. So if you're looking into the socket, it's a lateral view. And you can see we're looking at a side view here. Okay. If you are not looking at the socket, watch, I'm going to hide everything else and turn this bone around to the inside of it. There's no socket there. So that's going to be a medial view. And we're looking from this direction to the inside aspect or the medial aspect of the bone. All right, so over here I'm going to say the opposite. Socket is not visible. Second, how do we tell front from back? The ilium is always easy to find because it's always the upper part, so it doesn't matter which view you're looking at, it's up the upper part. This part right here, see how pointed projection that is? That's the pubis, pointy pubis. So the front on this view is this direction. So let's go ahead and add a little compass over here. Anterior, posterior, superior, inferior for this view only. So the front is this way, the back is this way. In fact, here's the butt cheek. Okay, hopefully that gives you a little bit of reference. Now, so that means this is the pubis here, C, and this is the ishy, squishy, and the tushy, B, ischium. On this view, all we're doing is taking this bone and turning it over. So notice C is here, it is also here. So for this view, anterior is this way, posterior. So there's ishy, squishy, and the tushy, ischium back there. Okay, and one more time looking at the medial view, whoops. This is the pubis. That's the ischium. And then of course this upper section is the ilium. All right, so we always want to get our bearings first. Always, always. All right, so let's go ahead and look at all the items for the ilium first. One of the first items is the iliac crest. And a crest, have we seen a crest before? I don't think we have seen one before. A crest is a long, prominent ridge. I'm trying to think if we have. So the crest is this whole pretty much upper border of the ilium. And I'm going to leave the very front of it uncolored and like the very back of it uncolored because those are two separate items. So taking my green all along here in the iliac crest, stopping just short of the end there. And that will be green. And then you can see clearly in the atlas, the iliac crest is this long ridge here. Okay, huge for muscle attachment. This upper border. If we come down to these lower pictures, here's our anterior view. Here's our iliac crest here. Again, stopping short of the front. You'll see why in just a minute. Iliac crest there and there. And then same, take it from here to approximately the front. Okay, and you can actually feel that in your waistline. Okay, that's the iliac crest. The next four, I want you to just sort of take notice of their names. Anterior, superior, iliac spine. We got another iliac spine, iliac spine, iliac spine. Okay, what is a spine? Sharp, slender projection. So it's a pointy section. And these directional terms will tell you everything that you need to know. So here's one. I know it doesn't look very prominent, but here's another. Here's a third. Here's a fourth. Ignore these other lines for now, the ones I just put in there. So if we're going with our directional terms, this is these two are the anterior ones. So here and here. Since this one is above, it will be the anterior superior iliac spine. And it is very common, especially on this one, because it is a major site for muscle attachment, to do this. Anterior superior iliac spine. And then below it, anterior, inferior, iliac spine. Just be careful when you use abbreviations. that you know what it means. Then this posterior side will be exactly the same except posterior, posterior, superior, iliac spine, and posterior, inferior iliac spine. And I'm just going to put a little color on those. And when I transition those same marks to this medial view over here, remember, I'm just going to flip it over. So my anterior one is here. Anterior, superior, anterior, inferior there in the light blue. Posterior, superior. These are all for muscle ligament attachment. Posterior, inferior. See how that is? Pink, then blue, yellow, then blue. Okay, let's look at the lower drawing. Here's the anterior, superior, and inferior. Okay, we don't really see the posteriors because this is an anterior view. And then posterior, superior, and posterior, inferior. Now, keep in mind they're all iliac spines because they're part of the ilium bone. This entire section A, all the way to, I'm going to highlight it or kind of make it more obvious, but I don't want you to do that, all the way to here, all that's ilium. All right, what's next? Greater sciatic notch. We have seen a notch before, this terminology. And the sciatic is a nerve, the sciatic nerve. So I'm going to show you where that is, and I'm going to show you the nerve using the atlas. So the greater sciatic notch is always on the butt side, and it is this massive cutout that's posterior. So I'm going to use abbreviations just for space consideration. Greater sciatic notch. That is an important point that will always face posteriorly. So we want to look for certain things that are easy to identify, and greater sciatic notch is definitely it. Over here on the medial aspect, right there. On the lower two, we'll look at our posterior view. This is the greater sciatic notch here and here. All right, so why is it called that? I'm going to turn this guy around and add in my nervous system. You see that massive nerve here? Sciatic. So notice as those, let's get really close. Those nerve roots are coming through the sacral foramina here. How much they merge to form a absolutely enormous nerve. And that is on the butt side. So you'll notice it sort of sits in that section. That's the greater sciatic notch right here. Okay, and then we will find that there's a lesser sciatic notch where one of these little branches sort of sits in a smaller version of that. So that is humongous, and see how far it goes down towards the knee and then divides towards the, not quite at the knee, but it divides. Massive nerve. Okay, next one is called, and I'm going to write out the pronunciation of this because a lot of times you can't really get it from the way that it looks. This is pronounced acetabulum. This one right here. Acetabulum. Acetabulum is the quote-unquote socket for the femur. The socket for the femur. And that's what told us that we were looking at a lateral view. So I'm going to use a really obnoxious color. Super obnoxious color. Try to make it very obvious. This whole cup shape, and actually that's what it's named for. I can't remember the exact translation, but something like vinegar cup or something like that. I don't know. It's an old-timey term. But this is important to denote the lateral view. So the socket, which is called, we now know, the acetabulum, is clearly visible here, non-existent on this side, right? Because it's just not on that side. We're also not really going to be able to see it too much here. Like we can kind of point like here's where it would be, but we can't see into it because it is a anterior view here. And then same. Definitely can't even point to it here. So acetabulum would be there. All right, so that's the socket, and that faces laterally. Last is the iliac fossa, and on the anatomy app, you can clearly see that it is this beautiful, shallow depression on the medial aspect of the ilium. So we can't put it out here because this is on the outside where the acetabulum is. Okay, it's not here. It's on the medial aspect. It's sort of bowl shape. Iliac fossa all through here and also here. So let's go over to our medial aspect and put it in there. This whole space. And there's a huge muscle. One of the muscles that causes hip flexion, we call it a hip flexor, that anchors here in the iliac fossa. Big muscle attachment site. Okay, so that's that. And then if I come down on this side, I will only be able to add it to the medial aspect, which I can see here from the front, and then also here. Okay, when I turn this around, I won't be able to see that, so I'm not going to put it on the posterior view. Iliac fossa. And one more thing I'm going to add is that is on the medial aspect. Okay, so that's it for the ilium. Okay, moving on to the ischium. Ishy squishy in the tushy. Notice it doesn't have a whole lot going on. It's not that big of a place. So we're on the butt side, and look, we've got a tuberosity, a spine, and a notch. All of that is found somewhere in this vicinity from here to there. A spine, a tuberosity, and a notch. So let's see if we can figure this out. This right here is the spine. And I'm running out of colors. You probably are too. This right here, I'm going to make it really pointy looking. That is the ischial spine. Why ischial? Because we're on the ischium. Ischial spine. Okay, just like up here we had iliac spines because this is all ilium bone. This is ischium, so that's ischial spine there in purple. On this view, we'll see it here. Ischial spine, make it sharp. Because on some people it's really sharp. In this diagram, we can see it here. Notice it's below that dotted line, so we know we're on the butt bone. Ischial spine. Ishy squishy in the tushy, and there it is there. Okay, there's ischial spine. Ischial tuberosity. A tuberosity is a roughened, raised projection for muscle attachment, and that is here. It is incredibly obvious on a real bone. We can't see it here because it's sort of around the corner. But if we look on the posterior view, here it is again. Ischial tuberosity there and there. And I'm going to take a look at the atlas once I've labeled this and see how they did on it. Ischial tuberosity. We've seen a couple tuberosities already. Ischial tuberosity. There it is. Now let's look at the atlas and see how they did on the ischial tuberosity. Oh, lymphatics. Oh, well, that's sort of disappointing. All right, ditching the femur, looking at just the ischium in blue, because, right, ilium's up here, ischium. You can see here's the ischial spine. Oops, let me get my pen. Right there. I'm pretty disappointed in the tuberosity. It should be this very elevated, almost like chunk of bone right here. And I'm not seeing that it's too obvious. But hamstring muscles, if you've ever heard of those, we haven't learned about those yet. Hamstring muscles attach to the ischial tuberosity. Ischial tuberosity. And then we have the lesser sciatic notch. So remember, this was the greater. This smaller one is the lesser sciatic notch. I'm going to go LSN. Lesser sciatic notch. So a smaller piece of the sciatic nerve sits in the lesser sciatic notch. And I can show you that on the atlas as well. So right here is the lesser. And let me go ahead and add in. There's the greater up there. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but right here, this is the ischial spine. So that means this scoop right here is the lesser sciatic notch. So as I turn, see how this nerve right there mimics that curve. All right, that takes care of the ischium. We just have the pubis left and then one little bit of other. All right, let's bust it out. Pubis, pointy pubis in the front. And some of these aren't really necessarily just pubis, but I didn't have anywhere else to put them. So look at this whopper. Obturator foramen. That sounds pretty fancy. Obturator foramen. I don't think that I want to color it because it's a foramen. So what's a foramen? It is a hole in bone. So there's only one hole. You can't miss it. It's this, obturator foramen, and it's visible no matter what direction you are looking. Obturator foramen on both sides. So that's actually a really important landmark because a lot of stuff, I'm going to label it on this side, a lot of stuff in the vicinity is named for the obturator foramen. We've got obturator externus muscle, obturator internus, obturator nerve, obturator arteries. It's all obturator stuff. So this is the obturator foramen. Okay, every picture you see it. So I got that one. The symphysis pubis is actually a piece of fibrocartilage where the two pubis bones connect. So I'm going to use my cartilage color on that, even though I've already used it. Symphysis pubis. And in order for the two to connect, I've got to go to this lower diagram in the front. And this little doodad right here, that's all it is. It's a piece of fibrocartilage, much like an intervertebral disc, preventing the two pubis bones from contacting one another. Symphysis pubis is actually made of fibrocartilage. Okay, symphysis pubis there. In the same vicinity, we have what's called the subpubic angle. And you really shouldn't have any problem finding that, subpubic angle, because it's exactly as it's named. Again, we'll come down to this bottom picture. So C on both sides are the pubis, sort of a V, sideways V shape. And this area right here is the subpubic angle, right here, and here. So what's interesting about the subpubic angle is that if the subpubic angle is less than 90 degrees. The angle is less than 90 degrees. It is a male pelvis. So that means these two pubis bones are very close together. If it is greater than 90 degrees, it is a female pelvis. And these two, this is very wide, and it has to do with the shape of the overall pelvis for childbirth. But this is the easiest way to tell the difference between a male pelvis and a female pelvis. Not the only difference, but the easiest one to notice. So when you get back to class, please look at my skeleton that's hanging up. I name him Edgar, and you'll be able to tell why I called him Edgar and not Edgarina. Okay, so that's subpubic angle. What do we got left? Superior and inferior. Oh, we've seen ramus before. Ramus means branch. We saw it on the mandible. So we have an upper branch and a lower branch of the pubis. Let's go to the front view so we can really tell the difference. And I'm going to outline pubis to start. Don't do this, but here's the pubis. So this section here is the upper branch, and this section here is the lower branch. So I'm going to color those two distinct colors, if I can find distinct colors. The superior ramus, meaning upper branch. We'll take it to like the middle. Superior ramus on this side. I'm going to take that same purplish color and come up and do that also here for superior ramus of the pubis and here. Okay, finally, our inferior ramus. It's going to be this super light pink. And we'll come down to the bottom diagram again. Inferior ramus. Here, inferior ramus, I'll label these. Okay, last but not least, we have this other right here, and it's called the sacroiliac joint. So let's be thoughtful. Sacro is for sacrum. Iliac refers to the ilium bone. So let's find where the sacrum and the ilium meet, and that'll be our sacroiliac joint. Can't see it on these upper two pictures because it's a single bone. We always need more than one bone to label a joint. So right here, and on the other side here. I'll label it over here, sacroiliac joint is really how our upper body weight is transitioned into the lower body. That's the sacroiliac joint there. And you can see it here, but it's easier to label it on the front view because you can really see that connection. All right, so that one's really super easy to see here. All right, there you have it, the coxal bone.